Burkina Faso found itself in yet another political shakeup in September 2022, marking the second time in just 9 months that the country's leadership changed hands through a military coup. This time, it was 34-year-old Captain Ibrahim Traoré who took charge, unseating Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, the very man who had overthrown President Roch Kabore back in January of the same year. Traoré wasted no time explaining why he and his men took action. Appearing on national television, he accused Damiba of failing to put an end to the wave of insurgencies wreaking havoc across the country. For Traoré and his supporters, that failure was reason enough to force a change in leadership. As news of the coup spread, many couldn't help but draw comparisons between Traoré and Burkina Faso's legendary leader, Thomas Sankara. It wasn't just the signature red beret that made people see the resemblance. There were deeper similarities. Both men were captains in the army, both seized power at the age of 34, and both took down military-led governments that had themselves come to power through force just months earlier. So who is Ibrahim Traoré? How did he go from a quiet student to the leader of a nation? Born in 1988 in Bondawi, a small town in Burkina Faso's Mohun province, Traoré's early years were far from the world of politics and military strategy. He attended primary school in his hometown before moving to Bobo-Dioulasso, the country's second-largest city, for secondary school. Unlike many of his peers in the military, who set their sights on a soldier's life from a young age, Traoré originally had a different path in mind. He moved to the capital, Ouagadougou, to study geology at Joseph Kizerbo University. Those who knew him during his university years described him as reserved and soft-spoken, but undeniably bright. At some point, though, his life took a turn toward the military, setting him on a course that would eventually make him one of the most talked-about figures in Burkina Faso. Ibrahim Traoré was at the top of his class, but instead of following the usual route of higher education, he chose a different path. He joined the army. In 2009, he enrolled at the Georges Namoano Military Academy in Po, a school that, while respected, wasn't as prestigious as the Kadiogo Military Academy, where Burkina Faso's well-known leaders, Thomas Sankara and Paul-Henri Damiba, had trained. By 2012, Traoré had completed his military training and joined the artillery regiment in Kaya. His skills and dedication didn't go unnoticed. Just 2 years later, he earned a promotion to lieutenant and was sent to Morocco for specialized training in anti-aircraft defense. But his real test came when he was deployed to Mali in 2014 as part of the United Nations peacekeeping mission, MINUSMA. Mali was no easy battlefield. The country was plagued by armed insurgents and violent extremists, and Traoré found himself in the thick of the fight. Those who served with him recall a critical moment in 2018 when militants launched a fierce attack in the northern Timbuktu region. Amid the chaos, Traoré held his ground, displaying a level of courage and composure that left an impression on his comrades. The following year, he was back in Burkina Faso, this time leading troops in Operation Otapuanu, a months-long military campaign aimed at driving extremists out of the country's troubled eastern region. While the operation was hailed as a success, it only brought temporary relief. The militants simply shifted their attacks to other parts of the country, keeping the security forces stretched thin. Traoré's military career continued to take him to some of the most dangerous front lines. He was stationed in the Makuya detachment near the treacherous Three-Border Zone, where Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger meet, a hotspot for extremist activity. There, he led multiple operations against armed groups, gaining a reputation for being fearless and deeply connected to his men. By 2020, he had climbed the ranks to become a captain. But with that promotion came growing frustration. He and other young officers couldn't ignore the worsening security crisis in Burkina Faso. Despite all their efforts, the jihadist threat wasn't going away. Worse still, they felt that those in charge weren't doing enough to turn the tide. By 2020, the security situation in Burkina Faso had reached a breaking point. Armed groups were tightening their grip on the country, and some towns were on the verge of falling under jihadist control. One of those places was Barcelogo, a small town in the country's central region. The road leading in was believed to be rigged with explosives, making any approach by vehicle a deadly gamble. That's when Captain Ibrahim Traoré made a bold decision. He and his unit would reach the town on foot, moving stealthily through the countryside. Their grueling trek paid off. They arrived in time to push back the insurgents and reclaim the town. To understand why Traoré's actions mattered so much, it's important to look at the bigger picture. Burkina Faso was caught in the grip of a growing insurgency, with jihadist groups wreaking havoc, especially in the northern and eastern parts of the country. These militants, some linked to Al-Qaeda and others to the Islamic State, weren't just launching attacks, they were seizing vast areas of land, effectively cutting off entire regions from government control. At one point, estimates suggested that the central government barely held onto half of the country's territory, and the situation was only getting worse. One of the biggest threats was the Group for the Support of Islam and Muslims, known as JNIM, which operated across West Africa but had deep roots in neighboring Mali. They thrived in areas where poverty, ethnic tensions, and weak governance made it easy to recruit fighters. Their funding came from multiple sources: ransoms from kidnappings, illegal taxation of locals, and smuggling operations involving weapons, people, and drugs. Alongside them was the Islamic State Sahel, another powerful jihadist group that carried out brutal attacks across Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Their tactics ranged from ambushes and roadside bombings to outright assaults on towns and military bases. By late 2021, Burkina Faso was in crisis. A quarter of the population struggled to find enough food, and the death toll from jihadist violence had surpassed 3,000 people, an alarming increase from the previous year. More than 2 million people had been forced from their homes, creating a humanitarian disaster. Amid the chaos, the government was losing control. In January 2022, the military stepped in. Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba led a coup that ousted President Roch Kabore, accusing him of failing to stop the growing insurgency. Damiba promised a new strategy, forming a military-led administration called the Patriotic Movement for the Safeguard and Restoration, MPSR. His goal was clear: take back the country and help the millions of displaced people return home. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, already known for his leadership on the battlefield, became a key member of the MPSR. In March 2022, Damiba promoted him to lead the artillery regiment in Kaya, a critical post in the fight against jihadist groups. Ironically, this move would set off a chain of events that Damiba never saw coming. Despite his promises, Damiba struggled to turn the tide. Attacks by jihadist groups not only continued but intensified. Insurgents expanded their hold over rural areas and even threatened major cities. Confidence in the new leadership was fading fast. For soldiers on the front lines, the situation wasn't getting any better. The enemy was gaining ground, supplies were running low, and to make matters worse, many troops weren't even getting paid on time. Frustration simmered within the ranks, especially in Captain Ibrahim Traoré's unit. His regiment became a hub of growing resentment, and as the months dragged on, Traoré found himself acting as the voice of his fellow soldiers. He made multiple trips to the capital, Ouagadougou, hoping to speak with President Damiba about the worsening conditions. But each time, his concerns were brushed aside. Meanwhile, the country's military losses kept piling up. Soldiers on the battlefield were fighting with limited resources, while high-ranking officers in the capital enjoyed the comforts of air-conditioned offices, seemingly disconnected from the harsh realities on the ground. Among the younger officers, patience was wearing thin. The final straw came on September 26, 2022. That day, a convoy carrying food and supplies to Djibo, one of the most besieged cities in the north, was ambushed by militants. The attack was brutal. 37 people, including 27 soldiers, lost their lives. The convoy was supposed to bring relief to Djibo's 60,000 residents who had been cut off from the rest of the country for over a year and a half. Instead, it became another devastating blow to Burkina Faso's already struggling army. Many soldiers placed the blame squarely on Damiba. To make matters worse, just a week before the attack, Damiba had sent a delegation of 70 people to the United Nations summit in New York. His government claimed it was an effort to secure international support in the fight against terrorism. But back home, it looked like a lavish and unnecessary trip at a time when the country was on fire. With every passing day, discontent among the troops deepened. Once again, Captain Traoré tried to meet with Damiba, hoping to press him for immediate action. But this time, he didn't even get a response. To the soldiers, this wasn't just negligence, it was an insult. They had given their all to protect Burkina Faso, and their leader had turned his back on them. That was the moment they decided enough was enough. At dawn on September 30th, 2022, gunfire erupted in Ouagadougou. Soldiers had taken up arms and a coup was in motion. By evening, the takeover was official. A soldier in fatigues, wearing a bulletproof vest and a red beret, appeared on the national television network, flanked by heavily armed men. The message was clear: Captain Ibrahim Traoré was now in charge. The announcement was bold and direct. The speaker accused Damiba of betraying the very cause he had claimed to champion. The security situation that justified our previous action has been pushed aside in favor of political maneuvering. The soldier declared, "This can no longer continue." The new leadership, now calling itself the Patriotic Movement for Safeguard and Restoration, MPSR, assured the nation that their priority was regaining control of Burkina Faso's lost territories and restoring security. They also made it clear that they were looking to form new international partnerships in the fight against jihadist groups. But if anyone thought this transition would be smooth, they were mistaken. Over the next 48 hours, the coup took an unexpected turn. Rumors began circulating that Damiba had fled to a French military base where he was planning a counterattack. In a country already burning with anti-French sentiment, this was like pouring gasoline on a fire. As word spread, thousands of furious protesters stormed the streets of Ouagadougou and Bobo-Dioulasso, targeting French institutions. The French embassy and cultural centers were attacked, as many people believed France was meddling in Burkina Faso's affairs. Paris denied any involvement, but the damage had been done. What had started as a military coup had transformed into a full-blown uprising. Throughout the night, more army units, including the Air Force and elite special forces, threw their support behind Captain Traoré. By morning, it was over. Damiba had no choice but to step down. At just 34, Captain Ibrahim Traoré had gone from a frustrated soldier to the most powerful man in Burkina Faso. Wearing his signature red beret, he stood tall as crowds flooded the streets of Ouagadougou, cheering his rise to power. The energy felt like a celebration, a moment of relief for a country battered by years of instability. His takeover had been swift, but the real challenge was only beginning. His predecessor, Paul-Henri Damiba, had also come to power promising to restore order. Yet despite his military background, he struggled to contain the growing insurgency in the north. Armed groups tied to ISIS and Al-Qaeda had tightened their grip. Overrunning villages and attacking convoys meant to bring supplies to isolated communities. For many Burkinabés, Damiba had failed where it mattered most, protecting the people. But Traoré's rise wasn't just about domestic problems. It also reignited long-standing tensions with France. Burkina Faso had been under French colonial rule until 1960, and even decades later, many felt the country was still too dependent on its former colonizer. France had stationed troops in Burkina Faso to help fight the insurgents, but their presence had become deeply unpopular. Many saw them as ineffective at best and part of the problem at worst. So in January 2023, Traoré's government made a bold move. It announced that Burkina Faso was cutting its military ties with France and gave French troops 1 month to leave. The decision sparked mixed reactions. Some cheered the push for independence, while others feared it would leave the country more vulnerable. By February, the French withdrawal was complete. At a military base in Ouagadougou, soldiers lowered the French flag, marking the official end of their operations. But the question remained, who would Burkina Faso turn to for support now? Many eyes were on Russia. In recent years, Moscow had been expanding its influence in Africa, particularly through its Wagner mercenaries, who were already operating in neighboring Mali. Speculation grew even stronger when Traoré met with Russian officials in August 2023 to discuss military cooperation. Just a month before, he had attended the Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg, where he personally met President Vladimir Putin. With these shifting alliances, Traoré was signaling a new era for Burkina Faso, one where the country would chart its own course, free from its colonial past, while seeking new partnerships to tackle its most pressing threats. Whether this gamble would pay off, however, remained to be seen. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting content.